The history of the Philippines, from indigenous cultures to modern nationhood. The Philippines, an archipelago of more than 7,000 islands in Southeast Asia, has a rich history defined by indigenous cultures, foreign influence, and a long struggle for independence. Its location made it a melting pot for trade and cultural exchange, bringing influences from Asia, Middle East, and later, Europe and the United States. The Philippines' history is a unique blend of diverse influences that has shaped its culture, language, and identity. Early settlements and indigenous cultures. The earliest settlers in the Philippines arrived around 30,000 years ago. These people, known as Austronesians, migrated from Taiwan and populated the islands, developing unique languages, spiritual beliefs, and systems of governance. Various groups, such as the Negritos and Malay settlers, established communities that were independent from each other, each with their distinct social structures and traditions. By the 10th century, these early Filipinos were engaged in trade with neighboring Asian civilizations, including China, India, and the islands of Southeast Asia. This period of early trade brought Hindu and Buddhist influences, evident in some artifacts and local practices in pre-colonial Philippines. The Philippines had no centralized government, as it was divided into barangays, small communities typically ruled by local leaders known as datus. Islamic influence in the southern Philippines 13th, 16th century. In the 13th century, Islam began to spread to the southern Philippines through Arab and Indian traders and missionaries. Muslim sultanates were established in Mindanao and the Sulu archipelago, such as the Sultanate of Sulu and the Sultanate of Maguindanao. These Muslim communities developed complex societies with rich cultures, education, and trade networks. Islamic influence in the south strengthened and established itself as a significant cultural force in the region. This influence remained even as the rest of the Philippines encountered Spanish colonization in the 16th century, shaping the unique cultural identity of the southern Philippines. Spanish colonization and Catholic conversion 15–1898. The Philippines entered a new era when the Spanish explorer Ferdinand Magellan arrived in 1521, marking the start of European interest in the islands. In 1565, Miguel López de Legazpi established the first permanent Spanish settlement in Cebu, initiating the colonization of the archipelago. The islands were named Las Islas Filipinas in honor of King Philip II of Spain. The Spanish imposed Catholicism, and over the next few centuries, the majority of the population converted. Catholicism became deeply integrated into Filipino culture, with churches, schools, and festivals becoming cornerstones of local life. The Catholic Church established a significant presence, with clergy assuming both religious and administrative roles, blending faith with governance. The Spanish introduced new crops, trade practices, and a centralized government, which replaced the barangay system. They also introduced the encomienda system, which resembled feudalism, where local Filipinos were required to pay tribute or provide labor to Spanish landowners. While this system increased agricultural productivity, it often led to abuses and exploitation. Throughout the centuries of Spanish rule, there were numerous local revolts against colonial authorities, including uprisings led by Diego Silang, Gabriela Silang, and Francisco Daguhoy. Although these revolts were mostly unsuccessful, They fueled a desire for autonomy and independence. The Philippine Revolution and the end of Spanish rule 1896–1898. By the late 19th century, anti-colonial sentiments were growing among Filipinos. Jose Rizal, a Filipino nationalist and intellectual, wrote novels such as No Limitangger and El Filibusterismo, which exposed the abuses of the Spanish regime. His writings inspired Filipinos to advocate for reforms, which eventually culminated in the Philippine Revolution. In 1892, the revolutionary society known as the Katipunan was founded by Andres Bonifacio with the aim of overthrowing Spanish rule. In 1896, the revolution began with the cry of Pugad Lawin, leading to widespread armed conflict. Bonifacio and Emilio Aguinaldo emerged as key figures in the struggle for independence. By 1898, the Spanish-American War erupted, which brought the United States into conflict with Spain. After the defeat of Spanish forces, the Treaty of Paris was signed in December 1898, officially ceding the Philippines to the United States for $20 million. Although the Spanish rule had ended, Filipino hopes for independence were dashed as a new colonial power took control. The Philippine-American War and American Rule 1899–1946. The transition to American rule was met with resistance, leading to the Philippine-American War 1899–1902. Emilio Aguinaldo, who had declared independence in 1898 and established the First Philippine Republic, led the fight against American forces. However, the superior U.S. military eventually prevailed, and Aguinaldo was captured in 1901, effectively ending the war. Under American rule, the Philippines experienced significant changes. The Americans established a public education system, reformed the legal system, and improved infrastructure. English was introduced as the medium of instruction, and it remains one of the country's official languages to this day. Despite these reforms, the Philippines was still a colony, and Filipinos continued to push for independence. In 1935, the Philippines was granted Commonwealth status, with Manuel Quezon as its first president. The Commonwealth period provided a pathway for eventual independence, but this was interrupted by World War II. Japanese occupation and World War II 1941–1945. In December 1941, shortly after the attack on Pearl Harbor, Japanese forces invaded the Philippines. The Japanese occupation was brutal, marked by severe hardship, forced labor, and widespread atrocities. Filipino and American forces initially fought back, but were ultimately defeated, and General Douglas MacArthur was forced to withdraw. However, he famously promised, "I shall return," which became a symbol of hope for many Filipinos. Throughout the occupation, guerrilla resistance continued, and local fighters allied with American forces. In 1944, MacArthur returned with American forces, liberating the Philippines from Japanese control in 1945. The battle to retake Manila was especially fierce, and the city suffered extensive destruction. Independence and the early Republic 1946–1965. On July 4, 1946, the Philippines was officially granted independence by the United States, marking the birth of the Third Philippine Republic. The early years of independence were marked by efforts to rebuild the country after the devastation of World War II. Political institutions were reestablished, and the Philippines entered a period of economic recovery and democratic governance. However, the country faced significant challenges, including social inequality, corruption, and a growing communist insurgency led by the Hukbalahap. Despite these issues, the Philippines maintained its democratic institutions and aligned itself closely with the United States during the Cold War. The Marcos era and Martial Law 1965-1986. In 1965, Ferdinand Marcos was elected president, initially implementing ambitious infrastructure projects that boosted the economy. However, by the early 1970s, the political climate became tense due to social unrest, a growing communist threat, and accusations of corruption against the Marcos administration. In 1972, Marcos declared martial law, effectively extending his rule beyond the constitutional limits. During this period, human rights abuses, censorship, and corruption became widespread. Marcos amassed wealth while stifling political opposition, and his wife, Imelda Marcos, became infamous for her lavish lifestyle. In 1983, the assassination of opposition leader Benigno Ninoy Aquino Jr. galvanized the people, leading to widespread protests. By 1986, a peaceful revolution known as the People Power Revolution forced Marcos into exile, and Corazon Aquino, Ninoy's widow, became president. The post-Marcos era and modern Philippines 1986 are present. Under Corazon Aquino, the Philippines transitioned back to democracy, drafting a new constitution and restoring democratic institutions. However, the country continued to face challenges such as economic difficulties, political instability, and ongoing insurgencies. Subsequent presidents, including Fidel Ramos, Joseph Estrada, Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, Benigno Aquino III, and Rodrigo Duterte, each addressed different issues, from economic reforms to combating corruption and terrorism. The rise of Duterte marked a controversial period in recent history, particularly due to his war on drugs, which drew both support and criticism. The Philippines has grown economically and strengthened its role in international organizations such as the Association of Southeast Asian Nations (ASEAN). However, it continues to face challenges, including poverty, political polarization, and tensions in the South China Sea. Conclusion. The Philippines' history is one of resilience, cultural diversity, and a complex legacy of colonialism and struggle for independence. Despite facing challenges from within and outside, the country has maintained its unique identity, blending influences from its indigenous roots, Islamic heritage, Spanish and American periods, and its own post-independence journey. Today, the Philippines stands as a nation with a vibrant culture and a growing presence on the global stage, reflecting its rich and complex historical legacy.